Okay, cool. So we've met Sherman. We've met Sherman's family, his love interest, assistant, boss, and a heckler. And most importantly, we've met Sherman's insecurities, which has been the major antagonistic force in the story so far. Sure, we've had other antagonists to some extent, like the Dean or Reggie, who both hate Sherman's guts, no pun intended, but his own mind, his own subconscious is the one we keep going back to that keeps reminding him that he's really not worth anybody's time, not even his own. And he keeps having these daydreams against his own will about basically that he's a monster. And it's a pretty common saying, or I'll even go as far as saying it's pretty common in real life, that when you hit your lowest point, is when you have the biggest change in your situation or your life, because it leads you to do something out of desperation that you never would have done before. Kind of like the cornered animal will do something that it doesn't usually do for survival. And so that's kind of the mode that Sherman's in. It leads him to make a very rash decision, taking this formula that he's created that has not been tested on humans and has not been tested in large doses in general. But he's this far gone in his mind that he feels like he has to make this desperate change for him to be significant as a person, for him to even respect himself. So let's see what happens when Sherman goes down the path of actually becoming the monster that he thought he already was. Let's get into part 3.
My cheekbones! I have cheekbones! Look at my cheekbones! Yes! Look at my chest! Look at my breast! Oh, I don't have breasts! I'm an A cup! I don't even need a brownie, but look! Oh God! I'm thin! I'm thin! I'm thin!
And there he is. Our antagonistic force now has a tangible form for us to see. I spoke in an earlier segment how I really preferred Eddie Murphy's version of Buddy Love as opposed to Jerry Lewis's original version, which, to expand on that a little bit more, Jerry Lewis's version of Buddy Love, though it was the first, was kind of more centered around just the fact that he was different from the professor, not necessarily having anything more than that. Where the professor was this giant nerd, the Buddy Love alter ego was more like, I'm cool because I'm a douchebag, which there's not really much depth in that. It's just kind of entertaining. Here with the Eddie Murphy version, where we have Sherman, who is also a giant nerd, on top of having the weight problems and having these internal struggles that we've seen, this version of Buddy Love is more than, you just look at him, it's like, oh, he's a douchebag. This guy is a textbook version of an id. And if you don't know what an id is, you've come to the right place, because I have a psychology degree that's gathering dust. Okay, I definitely didn't make this in 5 minutes. We're all going to agree that I found this on Bing. All right, that's the agreement that we have. We found this on Bing. So here we see that we have the superego, the ego, and the id. I'm going to give a pretty quick summary. This is what psychologist Sigmund Freud came up with. Stop groaning. Stop groaning. It's going to be quick, I promise. So the superego is basically your morals. So when you're thinking about doing something, your superego is the one that's going to be like, it wouldn't be right to do that, or it would be right to do that. The id is the other side of the spectrum, which is basically your impulses, your desires, things that might not be morally acceptable. And then in the middle is your ego, is the compromise, the meeting of the two, where basically your rationality. You think about both the morals and your impulses and desires, and you come to an agreement in the middle on what you're going to do. See, that was quick, right? And so basically talking about that, when I call Buddy Love, Eddie Murphy's Buddy Love, a very good representation of his id, Buddy Love does not really think much about his decisions because he feels like he's invincible. The movie doesn't have to tell us that Buddy is a manifestation of Sherman's innate desires because we get to see it. Show, don't tell, right? Buddy immediately starts doing things that Sherman wishes he could do, like go downstairs efficiently, be able to jump on the trampoline that we saw in the earlier montage, or be able to flirt with girls confidently and eat a bunch of food without fear of looking obese. Buddy immediately starts doing all these things, wearing athletic clothes because he can. And to piggyback off of that a little bit, the 57th time I watched this movie, I came up with this concept in my head that I called the buddy meter. So what you'll notice when you watch this movie is this is the first time that we're talking about that Sherman ever transforms into Buddy. And you'll notice that Buddy has he hasn't really spiraled out of control, and he's not really his own personality quite yet. He is effectively Sherman in a skinnier body. And so at this point, the buddy meter is basically 0% or close to 0%. Sherman is, for the most part, in control of himself. He's just doing a bunch of fun things that he's never been able to do. As the movie goes on, as Sherman transforms more and more frequently, as Buddy, the alter ego, the id, gains more confidence, it starts to slip away and Buddy becomes his own personality, and that's when trouble really starts to ramp up. With that being said, the next scene is when Buddy really becomes his own person. Carla comes to the lab to look for Sherman, and of course she finds Buddy. Buddy, thinking in Sherman's mind, of course, being the id, his innate desires, wants a redo of the date with Carla where he was embarrassed and he could barely even ask her out. This time, as Buddy Love, he's able to ask her out confidently. He trashes Sherman a little bit, basically throwing away what happened the previous night, and he's basically all in on going on this date and possibly getting revenge on the guy who heckled him so badly. Though it's kind of meh that Carla waits basically 24 hours to come check on Sherman to console him, rather than her doing it the night of, since she was the only one that could have consoled him. It makes sense that she doesn't know that Buddy isn't an actual employee or actually works at the university, because it's already been established that she's new there. She's a new professor there. Makes sense, right? So she immediately gets infatuated with him. Buddy comes up with his own name because a cop calls him Buddy, and then him just being corny like Sherman is, comes up with the last name Love. That's what's on his mind. He can't filter anything. And he kicks her out of the office, the lab, before he transforms back into Sherman. And so the stage is set for a redo of the date and a rematch with Reggie. Before that rematch, though, we have this scene that kind of confuses me. So Sherman rushes to his class and basically calls off class like he's just in this huge discombobulated rush, right? So it kind of, in my mind, implies that this is the same day of the Buddy transformation, because maybe while he was Buddy, obviously he's worried about himself and not about teaching a class. So when he transforms back to Sherman, he realizes, oh no, I have a class to get to, and he has to get himself dressed and cleaned up and rush to class. So even though that's the implication that I get from it, the day before, we already know, was the date that he had with Carla, and that was already said to be on a Friday night. I've never seen a university that teaches on Saturdays, so I doubt this is the same day. I could be wrong. Tell me if I'm wrong. And then if this is on Monday, what was Sherman doing on Sunday or on Monday that would make him late for class like this, with him being as nerdy and always on task as he is? I don't know. So that's kind of weird, but that's just me rambling about something that doesn't make sense to me. But anyway, moving on with the story, he calls the class off while the dean is sitting in and observing, and he kind of brushes off Carla a little bit when she finally finds him to quote unquote console him. And since he knows he has Buddy in his back pocket and the date is coming up with Buddy, He's doesn't really worry about it. He's not even thinking about it anymore. And that's what he tells her. Like, oh, don't even worry about that. It's not a big deal. You go on with your life. I'm going to go on with mine. You should definitely date Buddy Love. Basically throwing himself the perfect alley. He's about to alley-oop this bad boy. And I think this is great. Sherman's playing both sides of the fence. He's playing the nice guy that will talk to the girl about her problems, staying close, getting the inside information, gauging how she feels about the other guy who is also him. So as far as he's concerned, he's winning, and you can tell that he's smiling, he's moving around quickly, and he's encouraging her to talk to other guys as long as the other guys is technically also him. So here comes the date scene, and this is just a lot of fun. We get to see Buddy in, let's say, his wildest form yet. Buddy ends up being late to the date that he set up with Carla, and it leads to a hysterically funny outburst of excuses that he has on why he was late. Obviously, all of them are lies, but Carla takes it anyway. I will never not be impressed by Eddie Murphy being able to switch from the suave, confident Buddy Love to crybaby, excuse-making Buddy Love and back to suave, confident Buddy Love at a nanosecond, honestly. It's hilarious, it's great, and this is also kind of an Eddie Murphy stan account, so I don't think it holds much weight when I say that, but I'm still going to keep saying it. So Reggie finally appears, as I'm sure Buddy hoped on, and he begins heckling the crowd, which is what he does. And Buddy is completely prepared for him this time. He laughs along with the jokes pretty obnoxiously to the point that Reggie has to single him out to let him know, like, hey, man, I know I'm funny, but I'm not that funny. Like, you need to chill out a bit. And Buddy fully takes this opportunity to completely take the crowd away from him. They start this battle of jokes at each other. And by the way, this scene is improvised by Dave Chappelle and Eddie Murphy, which makes it so much greater when you're sitting there watching it that these two great comedians are really just having fun on camera. Buddy completely takes the crowd's energy away from Reggie and even ends up getting on stage with him while causing the crowd to continuously laugh at him with yo mama jokes. After Reggie eventually just figures out he's not going to get the crowd back and he's not going to get Buddy off the stage, he resorts to violence because how else are you going to protect your pride at this point? And Buddy completely just eviscerates him. And this is just based off of confidence. The confidence of Sherman thinking that he can do anything leads him to completely dismantle Reggie at his own game, both physically and mentally. And he caps it off by playing a piano solo while breaking Reggie's arm and flips him into the piano. If that is not a great way to take out somebody you have a grudge against, I don't know what is. It's about as good as it gets, people. So after Buddy returns from his victory, the movie does this weird thing where Carla acts like she likes Sherman a lot more than she actually does. She looks into Buddy's eyes and she's like, there's something familiar about your eyes, kind of alluding to, oh, it looks just like Sherman's eyes. But there is no way in hell that she actually sat down and stared into Sherman's eyes like he was her lover or something. And on top of that, she also says, I wish Sherman was here to see this, which Buddy kind of waves off because he is growing into his own person. But even that statement is kind of weird coming from her because she didn't care enough to even console him after this situation happened to him a few nights ago. But now she's all like only thinking about Sherman. Weird. But anyways, the formula starts to wear off on Buddy, so he starts to transform back into Sherman, starting with his lip after they finally kiss, and then his stomach starts to get larger like Sherman's, of course. For some reason, Carla is so dense, she doesn't even start to think that something weird is going on here. He says it's gas. Or an allergic reaction, and she's sitting there like, oh, okay, well, don't leave. I don't think I've ever seen a human being with their stomach basically look like it's exploding and think that's completely normal. But that's the least of Carla's worries. She just doesn't want Buddy to leave. So Jason also happens to be in the club and recognizes Sherman's credit card. He runs after Buddy after he realizes that's not Sherman, but he has Sherman's credit card, ride or die. And that's how he ends up finding out that Buddy is Sherman, because he's mid transformation. And this is all happening while Sherman is in this tiny Mustang that he can't fit in, and it's swerving all around the California streets, having near misses everywhere. This starts kind of a chain of Elmer Fudd versus Bugs Bunny situations between Buddy and Jason for the rest of the movie that I really like because of how hilarious they are. Jason is consistently punked by Buddy over and over again for the rest of the movie after this point, and I wish the movie had more of it because of how funny it is to me. Jason can never really get the upper hand no matter how much he tries to do the right thing, but the more Buddy becomes Buddy, filling up his buddy meter, so to speak, the more he just completely locks Jason up or punches him in the face or whatever the case may be. It's great to watch. To briefly address the CGI in this section, I think it's fine. It's definitely aged. You could definitely watch this movie and tell that it's made in the 90s. It looks kind of Looney Tune-esque, especially the scene that I have on screen right now, which, go figure, Looney Tunes is also a 90s movie. But it's not bad, I wouldn't say. It's not bad to the point where it kind of distracts you, but it's also not good to the point that you watch it and you're like, wow, I would have never guessed this was made in the 90s. No, you'll definitely know. So that's just it. It's fine. I'll address more of the CGI as we come across it. So to kind of start wrapping this video up, since we're getting to the climax area, we have the dean basically confronting Sherman since he's late for his class again, but this time he's so late that everybody's already gone. So the dean is used here to basically show Sherman and the audience that Buddy is starting to affect his personal life. It isn't just a Jekyll and Hyde situation anymore. He's starting to bleed into Sherman's personal life, and it's starting to affect it negatively. The dean noticed that he rented the Viper that he can't afford, and notices that he's being late for class, and he threatens Sherman that if this doesn't go well with him showing off this new formula for this grant money that they desperately need, then he's going to kill Sherman. He told Sherman he's going to literally kill him, very descriptively. So it's gotten to a point where Sherman really needs to start thinking about his use of this drug, so to speak, because people are starting to tell him that they notice that he's using drugs. So you should probably find help and stop. So with this set up for the climax, Sherman now has something to really consider going forward, and we'll get to see how it goes on the next video. Hopefully I can wrap up everything in the next video, but we'll see if I can stay on topic. That's so corny.